We would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Mi'kmahi, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We are honored to work and serve on this land. We stand with the protesters across Canada and the globe demanding an end to racism, discrimination, and violence. We acknowledge the deep and powerful challenges faced by all marginalized communities in Nova Scotia, Canada, and beyond. Good afternoon. Welcome to National Accessibility Week. My name is Jessica Ward. I am the Program and Project Manager with reachAbility. reachAbility is proud to be the Nova Scotia host for National Accessibility Week, and we have some members of the Accessibility Directorate of Nova Scotia here. Today, we're going to get an opportunity to meet a few of those members and to learn some more about the Accessibility Directorate and their role within Nova Scotia and the different standard developments that are being made. So I'd like to welcome everybody here. And first, I'd like to introduce you to Dawn Stegen.
Hi, everybody. Dawn Stegen. I'm the Interim Executive Director at the Accessibility Directorate, and pleased to be here today to talk to you about the work of the Directorate and provide an update on the progress government has made to meet its commitments to improve accessibility in Nova Scotia with Nova Scotia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carla Bezanson, and I'm the Program Coordinator with the Accessibility Directorate. And I'm really excited to be here. And thanks to reachAbility for inviting us to participate in this discussion today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Terri-Lynn Almeida, and I'm the Manager at the Accessibility Directorate. And really pleased to be here and talk a bit about our work at the Accessibility Directorate today.
Thank you so much. And again, really excited to have everyone here as reachAbility is quite active with the members of the public, and we get a lot of questions about what the Accessibility Directorate does, what this new legislation, Bill 59 and Access by Design 2030 means. So we're really excited to get to the nitty-gritty and be able to meet the Directorate and hear about what it is that you folks are up to. So I would like to ask Dawn a few questions. And I thank you for allowing me to do so. I think we're going to really break down what the Accessibility Directorate does in a way that people can really understand. So I'm really curious, what are the biggest misconceptions that you hear about the Accessibility Directorate?
So thank you. That's a very interesting question. And maybe before I get to what we think are maybe some of the misconceptions, let me do a bit of a backtrack and talk a bit about the Act and the work that we do at the Directorate. So the Directorate is responsible for the Accessibility Act, and the Act is really about the goal of an accessible Nova Scotia by 2030. And it will only succeed with the commitments of all of us across government and our partners, including reachAbility. And it is a critical time for our work in accessibility. And so, the Act was passed in 2017, and we were the third province to adopt accessibility legislation. And we're going to do that by achieving accessibility, by preventing and removing barriers to accessibility. And it's important to note that it's been around 3.5 years since the Act was passed. So that means we only have, it's 2021, and we have only 9 years, we're 9 years away from our commitment to an accessible Nova Scotia by 2030. It may seem like a long time, but it really isn't. And because the work that we're doing with our partners is societal change, it's transformational. And so, I think, many people understand why this work is important, but it sometimes goes beyond it being a human right, because there are many reasons why this work is important, and that includes that by achieving an accessible Nova Scotia, we open up opportunities for businesses and communities to thrive, for all people to participate in society. And a little bit about the Directorate. We're a small but mighty team. We're a dynamic team, and we're responsible for two things: for implementing and administering the Act across government and all sectors, and also addressing and advancing those broader disability issues within government. And the second part of our mandate has become even more important this year with the impact of COVID-19 on Nova Scotians with disabilities. 3 years ago, government brought forward two key policy documents that the Directorate developed on behalf of all government and with its partners. Access by Design 2030, which is the implementation strategy for the Act, and the first 3-year accessibility plan for government. And you put those two documents together, and there's over 40 commitments to advance accessibility. And we also have a commitment to report on those annually. And, Access by Design has a number of priorities related to standard development, awareness, collaboration, compliance and enforcement support and peace. Of course, we have to monitor our progress, and Government by Nova Scotia is a priority within that strategy as well, because we need to lead by example. And then the Government of Nova Scotia Accessibility Plan, well, we're the first public sector body prescribed by the Act. And so we are a leader in accessibility, and that's the direction we're going in. We're the largest service provider in the province, and we have that leadership role to play to make Nova Scotia barrier-free. And so we work across departments to meet the commitments in that plan. And we're really pleased with the efforts that have been made across government. And so I think that, some of what I've said gets to those myths or misconceptions. And one being that sometimes people think of us as having programs and services like grants. We don't, we're not an operations or a program service kind of division within government. We're actually focused on regulatory and policy development. And so that could be a surprise to folks. And, I've been in government for over 10 years. I was in the nonprofit sector for 20 some, and I really think that policy work is where we can make systemic change, and it's big work, but very important for lasting change. The other thing is, folks may think that we're really, really big in terms of staff. That's what they sometimes think about government. But we're, as I said at the beginning, we're small but mighty. 3.5 years ago, it started with a few staff, and then it grew a little bit to maybe a half a dozen, and now we're at 15. And really, we appreciate the growth that has been supported by government and the resources we've been given to help us meet our legislative obligations as we've sort of picked up the work and started taking on more actions as the years have passed. The other thing is that we're not the one-stop shop for everything about accessibility. It's really about everyone has a role to play. And so our work is about supporting others and collaborating, but, whether it be municipalities or other departments or the strong nonprofit organizations, the disability organizations, it's everybody has a role to play there, and we're one piece of it. And I guess finally, I would say that the other one is this is more than the built environment. The work is based on the definition of persons with disabilities in the Act, which is very broad. As well, the standard development work is very broad as well, and includes standards that will be developed around employment and communication and transportation and education and goods and services, and the built environment, but we're so much more than bricks and mortar, let's say. So I think, I'll leave it at that in terms of, but a very interesting question that you raised. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Dawn. And you might not have been able to see my excitement, but when you said that it's more than the built environment, it's one of the things that I'm most excited about. Is the built environment is hands down a key to many barriers that people with disabilities face on a daily basis, that everybody faces on a daily basis. I mean, one of the things that we've been learning more so every day is how our physical environment really causes a lot of issues for everybody. But there's nothing that thrills me more than to know that there's one standard based on built environment, and the other standards are all built around or focus on other aspects of disability, and how important that is to be able to show that, yes, the built environment is a priority, but it's not the only priority. And so I know reachAbility and folks everywhere are thrilled about that. And, I'm really excited as I've been studying the two other accessibility legislations from Manitoba and from Ontario to really see how the pieces of the Nova Scotia legislation and the standards are really coming together. So that's really, really exciting. And we are going to ask, I'm going to ask about the standards after, but I just, first, I know that there are many different aspects to what you folks do, and there's different arms and different, like as you said, different roles for everybody. So I wanted to ask a question, but I just first want to put into context. I can't believe that there's only 15 of you down there doing the work that you're doing. reachAbility has 17 staff. And we are one organization. So the work that is coming out of the Accessibility Directorate and the policy and the change that you folks are making on behalf of the government and behalf of people with disabilities is really astronomical considering the size of your team. So hats off to you. That I'm mind blown about that. I really thought that it was, as you said, that is a misconception. I really thought that it was a much bigger department. But I wanted to ask about the Accessibility Advisory Board. So I know that there is an advisory board, and I wonder if folks recognize that there are two separate things. There's the directorate and the advisory board. So could you tell me a little bit about what that is?
Sure can. Yeah, the Accessibility Advisory Board was established through the Accessibility Act, and they provide advice to the Minister of Justice on accessibility matters and how Nova Scotia can reach the goal of an accessible Nova Scotia by 2030. And they do critically important work. They had a meeting just last week, and some of the conversation was around accessible, affordable housing. They often will bring other deputy ministers in to talk about their work related to employment for persons with disabilities or accessible transportation. And again, they play an important role in providing advice to ministers. So the board consists of 12 members across the province with diverse and extensive experience and expertise in accessibility. So most board members are people who identify as having a disability. And we are committed, and the government is committed to diverse representation. This is a new board. The inaugural board finished their term in February. And so this board just finished their orientation, and they had their first business meeting just last week. So they approach their work with an emphasis on the importance of first voice. So they often do sort of a number of engagement opportunities through various committees, and again inviting speakers in. And of course, they do their work in a collaborative way. Some priorities for the board would include the work that we're doing with standards. So it actually is the responsibility of the board to make recommendations to government on accessibility standards. And then those recommendations get submitted to minister, and then they come to government to then review and work through kind of the regulatory process and the policy process. They're also very focused on raising awareness on the importance of accessibility. They play an important role in monitoring our progress towards an accessible Nova Scotia by 2030. And of course, they provide feedback on the development of the next or on the Government of Nova Scotia accessibility plans. And they because of the COVID-19 they are meeting monthly versus maybe 4 or 5 times a year, and so they have a Zoom meeting once a month, and we have representation these days everywhere from Cape Breton to the Valley, and very pleased that the chairperson, Roz Penfound, was involved with the first board, and of course provides great leadership. And one thing that's important to the board and to the directorate is that in terms of our journey towards ensuring, diverse representation on the board, we want to ensure that, when we think about the definition of disability and think about it from a physical, mental, intellectual learning or sensory impairments, episodic disability, those things that, the interactions with the barrier that hinder an individual's full and effective participation in society. If we heard from community that they didn't feel themselves, they didn't see themselves in the directorate or connected to the work of the board, we'd want to hear that. And because definitely that's top of mind for us as we work through the policies and we work through the conversation. So as it relates to the relationship between the board and the directorate, it is close, but the entities are distinct, and we provide some sort of secretarial or administrative support to the board. But they are independent of the directorate, and again, some of our business intersects with them, but they have their own work plan as well.
That's great. And I love that they are there for first person voice to hear from the people with disabilities, and that that is a place where their concerns are being addressed and taken forward. It sounds to me that the Accessibility Advisory Board is very similar to the accessibility committees that the AACs that are required for folks who are doing their action planning for the public sector bodies. So it seems to be like they are for the province as the AACs are for the folks that are doing the action plans. So that's really great that they're there to kind of advise and to bring forth information that is really representative of First Voice. So I'm really excited about that. And as a person who identifies as having a disability and is also a mother of neurodiverse children, if you have a spot or if there's ever an opening on the advisory board, you know, keep yours truly in mind. I would definitely love to have a spot in that board and bring forward some of my concerns and share them from that perspective of being someone with an invisible disability. Yeah. Children with invisible.
And Jessica, I'll just jump in and mention that the process for applying for the board, I mean, the terms are 3 years, but you know, the process is through the Government of Nova Scotia's agency boards and commissions, and definitely we can make that available to reachAbility and to others. But that process is open all year round. So if you applied now, there could be a vacancy in a year from now, in 2 years from now. And so, you know, your application is in there and it would get considered through that process. So, you know, don't wait for the call, I guess, for applications. Just go to the website and fill out the information and get your name kind of in the system.
Great. That's great information for me and for anybody else who might want to consider being on that board. So thank you for that, because it's not every day that we're given the opportunity to share our opinions and our concerns and to be told that our opinions and concerns are important. So that's really great for the viewers as well. So we've had a lot of chat about standards and we've been talking about them, and they happen to be some of my favorite things to read about. Just don't tell anybody. But I've been studying them and following along. And so I just thought maybe we could talk about where we're at with the standards development, because a lot of people know that there was legislation, that there was rules that, you know, as that came out that are going to need to be followed. And then maybe probably didn't hear much of the other things. And I know that the Accessibility Directorate has a lot of working groups and there's a lot of things happening behind the scenes. So I just thought maybe you could give us a little update on where we're at with that standards development and what that process really looks like.
Yeah, no, thank you. And this is one of those topics that could be a session in itself. So I'll try to synthesize it, but it is a key priority in the Accessibility Act to develop accessibility standards. And I do think we've made significant progress in a very short period of time. I know that when the Act was enacted, you know, it's, you know, there's a sort of a strong interest to sort of see these standards sooner than later. And, you know, the Directorate and the standard development committees and the board are committed to this work every day, but it is big work and there's big processes. And so just to give kind of a background, so the Act requires us to develop 6 standards over the next 10 years. And we're well underway on the development of the first 2 standard areas, built environment and education. And those were chosen through, you know, feedback that was received early on through consultation with the Accessibility Directorate across Nova Scotia as priority areas. So the board was established under the Act. We've discussed that already, and it has a responsibility to develop these standard recommendations. So just this past summer, last August, they provided the Minister of Justice with their recommendations on both the built environment and the education standards. And these recommendations were publicly released. It's actually required under the Act that Minister receive them and make them public. And so these standards are now, these recommendations, I should say, are now with government, interdepartmental committees for education, and then an interdepartmental committee for built environment. And we have solicitors, and we have sort of what we call domain experts, or people that kind of work in those fields on a regular basis. And we have policy analysts, and they're working away at all the recommendations and determining, you know, what they mean, what the implications are, how can they be rolled out, doing cost analysis, And so our hope is that we will see these enacted, the education and built environment, in a phased approach beginning in 2022 and then through 2023. So that's not that far away. We're kind of another year out. And but there will be some consultation that we'll be communicating kind of later on in the fall about opportunities again to sort of see this work. And I can't fully convey the amount of work that has been done by the Accessibility Advisory Board and the 2 standard development committees and the staff at the Directorate to develop these recommendations. And, you know, gosh, everything from jurisdictional reviews to looking at best practice research across the world to, of course, some of the consultation that has been done on the standards and other topics, you know, and all the meetings that have taken place. And we appreciate everybody who's contributed to this work. And, you know, if you're hearing this and thinking, gosh, I really haven't, you know, been invited or known about an opportunity to engage or read or consult, you know, please send us an email and let us know, and we'll get you on a database. But over the next 2 years, Built Environment and Education Committees actually continue their work. They're developing the next phase of recommendations. So it has been kind of a phased-in approach. And again, important part of this work will be the impact assessments that will go forward to government. But before I finish off commenting on, I want to talk about the next 4 standards. So we'll begin developing the 4 remaining standards, which include goods and services and information and communication, transportation, and employment. And we will, to meet our commitment of an accessible Nova Scotia by 2030, we're going to begin 1 standard area this year and then start an additional standard every year after. So stay tuned. I think there will be an announcement soon about the 3rd standard that we will begin work on this year.
Thank you so much for that, Dawn. And like I said, the standards, I'm right up on staying in touch with what's happening, and I'm already taking bets on what the next standard is going to be. So I won't say it out loud because I don't want to jinx it, but I feel it. I feel it in my bones, and I'm excited for it. And I know that there is a lot of work going on, and so thank you for that. And again, thank you to everyone who's been doing that. I wanted to switch over and ask my pal Terri-Lynn, because I know that you are the girl with the details when it comes to what's happening, what's going on, you know, when can we expect change and results? And I also know that, you know, you can give some insight on what is available for people. You and I have chatted a lot before, and I know that there are some grants, not necessarily through the Accessibility Directorate, but places where people can go, or that we've been advising small business and things to kind of look to. So I was just wondering if you can give some insight on, you know, what's happening, where can people go, and kind of like what's next.
Thanks so much, Jessica. And I'm going to pick up for a minute just on that standard discussion that you and Dawn were just having, because you talked about your interest in the board, and there might be other Nova Scotians out there who are interested in serving in and providing their insight as we do our work. And so those standard development committees, when that announcement gets made on what the next standard area is, there will actually be a call for recruitment to the standard development committee. And that's comprised, just like every piece of work that we do, half of the members must be persons with disabilities or from organizations representing persons with disabilities. So just want to put a plug in there for when that announcement comes out on what the next standard area, that whether you or some of the folks watching this right now might be interested in that particular standard area and getting involved. So there is an application process, but stay tuned. So just getting back onto to what you really were asking me about, I'm always happy to talk about the accessibility work that we're doing in Nova Scotia. And really, at the end of the day, what difference is it going to make? Because we're doing this to make things better for Nova Scotians with disabilities. And I do need to go back to, again, see, I'm going to go back there to the standards work, because really the work that we're trying to do is you're going to see the changes. Nova Scotians will see the changes as those standards are developed and implemented. And Nova Scotians will see improved accessibility in all of those 6 standard areas And we're at the Directorate developing ways to monitor and evaluate those improvements so that we're able to show the progress that we're making. But in the meantime, and in addition to standard development, there's a lot of other work underway on accessibility throughout government. So I'd like to share just a little bit about what government's doing to make our programs and services more accessible for Nova Scotians with disabilities. Nova Scotians who are disabled, that there are a number of programs for disabled Nova Scotians provided by various government departments, whether it supports throughout the education system, including early childhood, primary to grade 12 or post-secondary, the employment supports that are available through labor and advanced education, or the disability supports program through the Department of Community Services. And there's also many other programs that are provided to all Nova Scotians, including the 30% who identify as having at least one disability. And Dawn mentioned this before. She talked about how government of Nova Scotia made a commitment to be a leader in accessibility. And that includes in how we provide goods and services and programs to Nova Scotia. And that back in 2018, we released the first Government of Nova Scotia Accessibility Plan. And that plan has 23 commitments from 5 different priority areas, and it was developed by government with input from Nova Scotians, including disabled Nova Scotians. And we've made quite a bit of progress on those commitments, and that progress is reported annually through the Minister's Annual Report on Accessibility. All of these documents, Jessica, people don't need to hear everything from me today. It would take too long, but all of these documents are available on the Accessibility Directorate website. And we're actually working now on the Minister's Annual Report for 2020-2021. Now, to help develop the plan back in 2018, and because we've talked about how it's not just about the Directorate, all departments have a role to play in accessibility, government established a committee comprised of key leaders in accessibility from across government and from across departments. So this interdepartmental committee on accessibility has been supporting accessibility work in their own departments and then coming together to support a cross-government movement on accessibility. So I am getting to your point, really. I'll get there eventually. So what's happened so far? Well, work on implementation of that first plan has been happening, and we've also been looking to build accessibility into the existing programs and services that are provided by government. So some things might be seen by the public, and some things are being seen internally. So for example, the Public Service Commission has developed mandatory diversity training that all public staff participate in. And Communications Nova Scotia has provided accessibility in the government website. And I'm sure all of us are aware of the American Sign Language interpreters now, who are regularly a part of Premier's briefings on COVID-19, which is really important to ensure that deaf Nova Scotians have access to the same information as all Nova Scotians. Labor and Advanced Education has made changes to their skills development program to improve access for persons with disabilities. Early childhood education and early childhood development has incorporated accessibility into the curriculum through using some of the Rick Hansen Foundation materials. And while Lands and Forestry, they have made incredible improvements to accessibility in parks, beaches, and campsites throughout Nova Scotia. And this is really even more important now as so many of us don't have access to some of the recreation activities that we might normally take part of during the pandemic. So now Nova Scotians who are disabled will find accessible beach access, toilets, comfort stations, shelters, sport fishing docks, and campsites throughout the province. And there's certainly more to do. Well, and you talked about the grants, and I'm going to actually ask Dawn to talk about that in a few minutes, because she's really familiar with those grant programs that Communities, Culture, and Heritage provides. I might have even mixed that up, so I might have to re-say that. But there is more to do, and I'm probably getting way ahead of some of the discussion or questions you might even ask me, Jessica. I'm really happy to share with all of those who are watching today that we're starting work on government's next accessibility plan. So as Dawn mentioned, the first plan was for 2018, and it takes us to 2021. So we're in that last year cycle of the plan, and we're starting to develop the 2022 to 2025 plan. And we're going to be looking for input and collaboration throughout the development process from our government departments, from the Accessibility Advisory Board, and from disabled Nova Scotians and disability organizations throughout the late summer, early fall. You know, every government accessibility plan is an important one. First one laid our foundation for accessibility, and this second plan is going to take us only 5 years out from our goal of an accessible Nova Scotia by 2030. So you can be sure that this next plan is going to be really focused on showing government's continued commitment to being an accessible leader and having accessibility throughout our programs and services. So we'll be really looking forward to engaging you and those who may be watching today as we develop that. And maybe Dawn, maybe Jessica, I can turn it over to Dawn to talk about some of the grant programs.
I would love that. If Dawn could talk about the business accessibility grants from CCH, and you quoted it right, Terri-Lynn. You second guessed yourself. It definitely is community's culture and heritage. And I know that we didn't really prepare for that, but Dawn, would you mind sharing just a little bit about the business accessibility grants? Great.
Yeah, no, they're two very important grants, and actually just a couple of years ago government committed additional funds, and so now the Community Accessibility Grant Program has a full budget of $1 million, and the Business Accessibility Grant Program is the same. The Community Accessibility Grant Program, I'll speak about that one first, actually has had a few guideline changes this year that I think are great. The first one is it's up to $50,000. So if you were applying to this grant program just even a year ago, it could have been capped at $10,000. So $50,000 is a really great improvement. And it funds up to 2/3 of the costs associated with the accessibility project. So you could be a registered nonprofit to sort of be considered for this grant, as well as a federal charity or a Mi'kmaq community, municipality, town or village, a legion. And what I learned actually today is the universities and colleges fall under this grant program as well. So that's great. And so again, some really good improvements happening, especially they align with the work that as we move forward with prescribed public sector bodies. One thing though that has changed is they have gone to one deadline a year. So the deadline this year was April 30th, and they have had a amazing response. Over 110 applications are in. So they have not, Minister has not made final decision, but I suspect that they are kind of subscribed for the year. But you can definitely contact CCH with your ideas, and they could put your, get your proposal going, and it could be considered for next year. Business accessibility is taking applications on an ongoing basis, and they still have money available this year in that program. And that one actually funds 5 different categories for business. It may be the built environment, but it could also be assistive devices, communications, transportation, and also education. And that program will fund at around 66% of the cost of the project or the initiative, up to $100,000. So again, there's a great opportunity there for businesses to consider everything from maybe it's an accessible website, maybe it's signage, it could be the ramp and the pathway and the accessible bathroom that is needed. But again, there's some great opportunities there. And I think they're open right now. And again, encourage folks to contact CCH about that program if they are registered as a business in Nova Scotia.
Yeah, I absolutely love those 2 grant streams. And if you do require that and you're unable to find it, just reach out to us at reachAbility and we can point you in the right direction, because we are very familiar with those. And I love that they also cover education, because that's key. Education is key to eliminating barriers for people with disabilities. And it's one of the things that a lot of grants, especially ones that focus on like built environment or that are more built environment heavy, don't cover. So thank you for sharing about that. And so we've made Carla wait forever, but I'm really glad that she's stuck around and is here to answer some questions, because I know that Carla will be able to really talk about what some of our viewers are probably hoping for. And that is, does the Accessibility Directorate have navigators to assist people with disabilities with finding resources? And those could be resources from anything from financial supports to accommodations or assistive devices, or even the most recent thing that we've been running into is to help people find ASL interpreters, as a lot of medical appointments have turned to being online, and not very many doctors or in the medical profession have the ability to provide ASL interpretation, or probably none to be exact. And so that's something finding, because ASL interpreters are few and far between, they're so busy, being able to find them and find funding for that is something that a lot of people have been asking. So Carla, could you give us some insight on, where the line kind of draws with the Accessibility Directorate when it comes to those, or how you're able to help navigate pointing people in the right direction?
Thanks, Jessica. Yeah, that's a great question. And I know naturally you've directed this towards me, because you and I have even touched base several times to connect with individuals who have reached out to me and reached out to you and reachability. So certainly I can touch on that a little, but I do want to give Dawn an opportunity to speak to this a little bit as well first, because I know Dawn had some points prepared as well, and then maybe hand it back to me.
Yeah, that would be, thanks, Carla. And the definitely, navigation services is a very important conversation. And we recognize at the Directorate that there's many challenges for Nova Scotians with disabilities and their families to find programs and supports and services that they need. And government has made a commitment to our accessibility plan to explore the establishment of accessibility navigators to assist persons with disabilities in accessing information and services. And so we've been doing that work and looking at what opportunities there are to improve navigation services for Nova Scotians with disabilities. We've met with disability organizations, with government departments, and Nova Scotians with disabilities for advice and feedback. And we know that there are a number of organizations like reachAbility that already offer great navigation services in Nova Scotia, and we appreciate and value the work of these organizations. But in the meantime, we do receive inquiries and calls and emails from persons with disabilities, and Carla fields these navigation-related calls. And so I'll pass it over to my colleague to kind of talk a bit about that work.
Yeah, thank you, Dawn. So yeah, of course, we receive inquiries and emails and phone calls from individuals in the community who have a disability and are looking for assistance in finding a solution, sometimes to a situation they may have encountered, or they may be experiencing barriers and need assistance and support in finding the proper resources and programs and supports that are available in our communities. So, Jessica, as I'm sure you're aware, these kinds of inquiries can vary greatly. And so, yeah, it's really a matter for me of finding the right information to support individuals. And sometimes it's a matter of providing them with information so that they're able to advocate for themselves. And in other instances, it can be connecting individuals with, sometimes it's a legal aid program, or it's a social work, the social work clinic, or a social worker or a caseworker. As you know, many times I've connected folks with the programs that are available through reachAbility, which has been really such a great, so many great programs to be able to refer people to when appropriate. So. And other times it can be other programs such as the disability support programs or other things that are offered within government departments. And so, yeah, there are many supports available in Nova Scotia, and it can be challenging to navigate those many supports that are available. And certainly there's a lot of information out there. So of course we try to support individuals with finding the right information and making the right connections.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great. And we have connected on a number of occasions, and teamwork makes the dream work. So, I mean, there's some of the questions and concerns that come up, they're not easy fixes. And really, one thing that I've learned in my years of working in the nonprofit sector is that there are so many organizations that I still don't even know about. Right, there are so many amazing organizations and nonprofits and government agencies that I've never even heard about, and I like to think that I know quite a bit when it comes to those things, because we navigate a lot, right? I mean, that's what we do. When you establish trust, as the Accessibility Directorate has established with people with disabilities in the province of Nova Scotia, and as reachAbility does with our clients, you know, you get a lot of inquiries, and people need you to kind of help them sort through that stuff. And I think that's great that our province has so many amazing resources that we can kind of reach out to. But Carla, a lot of the stuff we talk about is not about navigating the specific things for people with disabilities, but it is about the prescribed public sector bodies. In the work that we're doing through reachAbility and our accessibility services. You know, we've come to you a bit and chatted. So we've talked about that, the prescribed public sector bodies a lot. And that's something that we all know what that means, but a lot of our viewers may not understand what that means. But I'll tell you my favorite thing about it is that, and our CEO, Tova Sherman, always says the fish thinks from the head, which is a very East Coast thing for Tova to say. And if you know Tova, you've probably heard it already. But what she means by that is that you have to lead by example, and that the leadership needs to start at the top. So what I love about prescribed public sector bodies and what that means when it comes to the standards and the legislation is that the province of Nova Scotia is, you know, starting with them, right? We're starting with like the leaders or the more government regulated entities, and that they're being held accountable first to this legislation. So that really excites me. And when trying to explain to other people and to other organizations that, like, you know, the government's starting with them first, that really helps to kind of push home the message that how important this is, and that the government's taking it extremely seriously. So can you tell us a little bit more about the prescribed public sector bodies and who, kind of an example of who they are and what that means?
Yeah, thank you. And I'm so glad that you bring that up, because we talked about the work that the Accessibility Directorate and the Accessibility Advisory Board are doing, and the work that other departments within government have done. And so, yeah, it's I definitely want to talk a little bit about some of the really great work that is being done in our communities to advance accessibility. And namely, as you mentioned, the prescribed public sector bodies. So under the Accessibility Act, certain organizations are prescribed. And so what that means is that they have certain requirements that they have to meet as it relates to accessibility. And I'll touch on what those requirements are, but just first I'll go over the prescribed public sector bodies. So there are two kind of groups. There is one group that is, they were prescribed as of April 1st, 2021. And that group includes Nova Scotia universities, Nova Scotia Community College, public libraries, and municipalities. And so the second group that will be prescribed as of April 1st, 2022 is the Crown Corporations, Nova Scotia Health, IWK, the RCEs and CSAP, so the PETA 12 school system, and a couple others. So that's the second group. And once prescribed, they do have some requirements to meet. And within 1 year, these prescribed public sector bodies have to assemble an accessibility advisory committee. And in keeping with the other committees we've talked about, it is a requirement that at least one half of the membership of those accessibility advisory committees is made up of persons with disabilities or people who represent organizations that represent people with disabilities. So that's a requirement, the accessibility advisory committees. And as well, within 1 year, they have to develop an accessibility plan for their organization. And so this is a huge piece of work. The accessibility plans have to They have to touch on, their current situation. So what are their successes already as it relates to accessibility, and what are their barriers, and how are they going to remove and prevent barriers to accessibility within their operations and their organizations. So those plans do have to be completed again within 1 year of prescription, and they have to be updated every 3 years, and they have to be posted online and publicly available once they're completed. Of course, another requirement of prescribed public sector bodies is that they do have to comply with the accessibility standards as they are developed and enacted. So as you can imagine, of course, that's a huge piece of work. And so the Accessibility Directorate, we work closely with these prescribed public sector bodies to provide support. And a lot of times that can look like developing different resources, so webinars, written resources, toolkits, guides, that sort of thing. And many of those are on our website if anyone was interested in seeing some more information. And so I wanted to share a few of the successes of some of the prescribed public sector bodies as well. So one thing that I wanted to touch on was the post-secondary sector. They developed collaboratively an accessibility framework. And so that framework, it outlines the collective commitments and goals of the Nova Scotia universities and Nova Scotia Community College as it relates to accessibility. And we are the first province with a post-secondary accessibility framework, so it's really exciting. And the libraries followed, or our public libraries in the province followed in the footsteps and are also developing an accessibility framework collaboratively too. So that's really, really exciting. There are a few accessibility plans that are actually already completed. So the Wolfville Accessibility Plan, this was the first municipality to create their plan. And also recently, the Joint Committee in the South Shore, so that's the Lunenburg County Joint Accessibility Committee, and that's made up of 5 different municipalities. So I'm referring to my notes here just so I don't mix them up, but it's the town of Lunenburg partnered with the municipality of the district of Lunenburg, the town of Bridgewater, town of Mahone Bay, and municipality of the district of Chester. So that joint committee has finalized and had their accessibility plan approved as well by council. So that's on their website publicly now too, if anyone was interested. Another one is the town of Kentville. So they have their accessibility advisory committee assembled and they're working on their accessibility plan. And they have an accessibility page on their website that provides information and updates on the work they're doing. And we also saw an update from them the other day that they updated their entire website to be compatible with screen readers and other devices to navigate the pages on that website with assistive technology. So we thought that was a nice thing to share too. But there are many other prescribed public sector bodies that have begun this work and have started assembling their advisory committees. Many have had their inaugural accessibility advisory committee meetings, which I've been lucky to be a part of many of those, first initial meetings and provide some information. And it's really great to be a part of that and see that work happening. And many of the plans are underway as well. So lots of great news to share as it relates to the prescribed public sector bodies.
Yeah, very exciting work. I was actually speaking with the South Shore group very recently, and they mentioned that they are moving ahead with their action plan and starting to follow through with some of the recommendations that they put in there. So they're really moving along. And because of one of the roles that I have, I get to work and hear from a lot of different organizations and municipalities. And so it's really exciting to see how the province of Nova Scotia is really getting behind this. And in typical Nova Scotia fashion, we could have, gave ourselves a little bit of leeway and taken it easy during the pandemic and made a lot of excuses as to why we were going to slow down. But it's really exciting to see that the municipalities are on it. We were able to work alongside the town of Kentville and working with their plan, and we were engaging with the public in any way that we could, and they really have a great team there that's really focused on putting that plan into action. So that's really exciting that I know that during the council meeting they announced or they presented the action plan, so that should be added to your list soon, as soon as they approve it. So that's really exciting. Yeah. But there's a lot of, the province of Nova Scotia is full of municipal groups that are really working hard to meet that prescribed public sector deadline, or that, expectation of within the first year. So there's a lot of work happening behind the scenes, which brings us full circle to the fact that, even though we don't necessarily see what's happening, there are people, the whole province is trying to engage people with disabilities, because one of the things that's a part of creating that action plan is getting that first person voice, right? It's not based on, I decide that we need to have better roads, and so let it be so. It's really based upon a lot of first person engagement, which is the process of this whole thing. That's like the theme that I hear with this chat that we're having, is that on all levels, whether it's the Accessibility Directorate, the advisory board, the municipal government levels, public sector bodies, everybody is really trying to not make the decisions based on what they think is best, but to really go to the people that are going to be affected by the policy that's being made, which is the people with disabilities, and allowing them to lead the conversation, which is probably the best conversation for us to have during National Accessibility Week, which is, here to not necessarily emphasize the provincial legislations, but to talk about the Canadian Accessibility Canada Act, which came into place. It reached royal assent a year after the province of Nova Scotia enacted our legislation. And, we're a little bit behind. We're about 35 years behind the US with their Accessibility Act, but we're there. And the federal government is rolling that out. And so it's just really great to be able to have so much good news coming from Nova Scotia to be able to share to all of Canada through our National Accessibility Week digital conference. So I'm really excited that we were able to get this together and to be able to show Nova Scotians what everybody's doing behind the scenes to make Nova Scotia the most accessible, there I am with my list, the most accessible province in Canada, because I think we're going to get there. And I do agree with you, Dawn. 9 years seems like a really long time, but in the world of accessibility and knowing what that's going to take, it doesn't seem long enough, but we're really excited that we've given ourselves a challenge as a province to kind of push towards that. So I'm really excited. Never in my life, if you would have asked me 5 years ago, that I would be excited about anything that has to do with policy. But I'm really excited about this and seeing our province come together in yet another challenging time. But we're coming together to keep things moving forward. So there's no other time that's more important to people with disabilities than right now. So I think it's important that we keep pushing forward. Did you have any other closing remarks, or did we miss anything? I feel like we've touched on a lot. I've kept you around a long time, but I feel like I'm with my girl gang right now. I could talk standards all day.
Well, Jessica, on behalf of the Directorate, thank you to reachAbility for the opportunity and connecting with us. This has been an amazing opportunity to talk about the progress made, the work they're doing, but the work we're doing, but we value and appreciate everything that reachAbility is doing with its amazing programs and services and outreach. And again, if anybody would like to connect with the Directorate, we're available at, you can get our contact information and our resources at novascotia.ca/accessibility, and we'd be pleased to hear from folks.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much for coming. And we hope you tune in for the rest of National Accessibility Week and see all the other things that Nova Scotia and Canada has to offer around accessibility awareness. Have a good day. Bye-bye.